Hi, my name is Catherine Van Tassel, and I'm the Director of Behavioral Health Consulting here at GBS. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and a physician assistant board certified in lifestyle medicine. Today, we're going to be talking about the importance of self-care and what the relationship is between our habits and our emotional well-being. So let's get started. So first, why is it important for us to care, to have self-care? And we're looking at this on a very wide spectrum because we definitely have mental health, we have brain health, and we have stress, anxiety, sleep. All of these things impact our health, both mentally and physically. So taking a step back on why it's important for us to practice good self-care is looking at the association between disease and stress. So we know that 70% of primary care appointments are related to stress and lifestyle. We really see the connection between our coping skills and how we handle stress and how that impacts our health. And this ends up being multifactorial. We see diabetes, headaches, hypertension, like brain fog, difficulty thinking, mood disorders, premature aging, GI distress, difficulty managing weight, all impacted either by lifestyle, stress, poor coping skills, or maladaptive coping skills. So really taking care of ourselves, managing stress, which we all are going to have, and some stress is good stress, but not being able to either manage or cope or have good skills to be able to deal with this really has negative consequences, both on mental and physical health. So when we look at just mental health, let's take a look at our brain and what happens. So a little bit of a neuroanatomy class, which I'll try and make not too snoozy, but fun, is there are three important parts of your brain that I want you to know for the purposes of this talk. So we have our frontal lobe. This is the part of our brain that makes all of the good decisions. So essentially, this is what gets us out of bed in the morning to go to work instead of pressing the snooze button and laying in bed and watching Netflix all day. This is the part of your brain that makes the decision to get dressed and not wear your athletic leisure wear to an important business meeting. Making appropriate comments in a meeting versus just screaming out loud, which you really might think. This is kind of the governor that makes us sit up straight and behave appropriately. Then you have the amygdala. So this portion in your midbrain, and your amygdala is the guard. So I always call her Amy. Amy is essentially the person that's always looking out and scanning our environment for danger. Is there anything that I need to alert the system to say, hey, we got to react, something bad's going to happen? And then in the back of your brain is your hippocampus. And your hippocampus, this is the part of your brain that has memory retention. This is where you're able to learn new things. So this works in this perfect system together. However, when we have unmediated stress, we have poor sleep, we're overbooked, we're stressed out, Amy, our amygdala, she starts turning on the warning systems. And the warning systems are just trying to get us to survive and essentially shuts off our memory, our learning, and we get this brain fog. Remember the frontal brain that makes all the good decisions, that we can participate in the activities that we need to with excellent cognitive function? Those start to go offline because the amygdala is hypervigilant and is just in this protection mode. So the body will release stress hormones. One of them is cortisol. Cortisol essentially puts our body into this fight or flight mode. Fight or flight mode is, again, a protective mechanism of the body. And what happens is we see this poor attention, poor learning, difficulty sometimes finding the words. Like you're like, oh, I know that. What is that? I can't remember what that is. That's why, because brains that are overstressed, underslept, undernourished don't perform as well. And then we can see when this goes on chronically, we get poor sleep, our nutrition suffers, and then we really start to see emotional distress and potentially turning over into major depressive disorder, generalized anxiety disorder. So it's really important that we are taking good care of our brains, that we are paying attention to our brain health, just like we would our heart. So, what does this look like? Just a quick review of what symptoms of major depressive disorder could look like and generalized anxiety disorder. And I just like to say that people can have stress and not have a diagnosis of major depressive disorder or generalized anxiety disorder. I just wanted to bring this up because one can have symptoms of major depressive disorder, and this is a good thing to look at. And oh, maybe I'm seeing more than one or two of these symptoms, and it would be a good idea for me to maybe chat with my primary care provider, or if I'm seeing a therapist, to talk about this. So we see changes in mood, being either really, really sad all the time or irritable, changes in sleep, appetite, energy. So we can sleep less or sleep more. We can eat more or eat less. Mostly have a decreased sense of energy. And again, I was talking about having this poor ability to think clearly. We could see why that is happening. And sometimes you can just feel very slow or very keyed up and restless. And this can get so bad that sometimes people will have thoughts of, you know what, it might be better if I just wasn't here. Thoughts of death and dying. Lack of interest in anything that one found pleasurable before. Let's say you loved to hike in the mountains and all of a sudden you had no interest in doing that. And then all these feelings of self-worth, like poor self-worth, guilt, loneliness, emptiness, totally different than maybe what you had felt before. And then also physical symptoms. We can manifest physical symptoms secondary to stress, secondary to anxiety, and definitely depression. I think really, really bad headaches and tight shoulders, digestive issues. Because remember when I was talking about Amy and the amygdala turning off the system, putting you into fight or flight, we go out of rest and digest. And that's where our GI system is working. We don't need to be digesting our food if we're fearful for our lives. So we see that that system gets turned off and people have a lot of GI disorders, just really impacting chronic pain as well. And then for generalized anxiety disorder, we see it's really difficult to control worry. We all worry. But when you can't shut that off, or it's just ruminating, going over and over and over in your head, interrupting your sleep. And then again, some of the same symptoms of major depressive disorder you can see in generalized anxiety disorder, that restlessness feeling, always feeling on edge. Again, the difficulty concentrating for the reasons we've talked about, feeling very tired and irritable. And again, with physical manifestations, and not sleeping well. It's hard to sleep well when we're anxious and our mind is running. Okay, so that's just a review of what happens when we're not managing our self-care, when we don't manage stress, and when things may transition over into a diagnosis of major depressive disorder or generalized anxiety disorder. So I want to talk about some of the habits that we have today that could hinder our self-care, and then what we could do to flip that script, to change that over. And this is for everybody. This is not just not for people that specifically have a mental health condition. This is across the board for everyone. We all have brain health. We all have stress. We all have moods. And we want to do everything we can to make those all optimal. So what are some habits that we may want to reconsider that we may be doing out of stress, but aren't really doing us any favors? So we're going to talk about social media, negative self-talk, inconsistent sleep or poor sleep, having a sedentary lifestyle, maybe one too many processed foods, and then again, this excess worry. So we'll go through them one by one. And I feel like I've been kind of the bad news bears about stress and worry and what that means for our lives. But I'm going to include things that are positive that we can do that are really going to help us in terms of our self-care. Okay, so let's just look at social media. So social media is really interesting. And I just want to say right off the bat, I don't think that everybody shouldn't have a smartphone and you should get rid of all of your social media. I definitely see places where social media is very helpful. I think of people that may have family or loved ones in other countries, and social media is an easy way to stay in contact. Also, support groups. There are a lot of support groups through social media. Another fantastic use. However, sometimes there can be too much of a good thing. And we're seeing social media that there's some negative impacts of it as well. And it's really interesting if you just look at our usage of social media, because this is relatively new to us. So Americans check their phones every 6 minutes. And there's a reason for that. So at the beginning of this, I said that we have habits that we do that may be maladaptive, meaning we are doing them because they make us feel good in the short term, but in the long run, they make us feel bad. And what we see is every time we check our phone, it's almost like a little mini slot machine. So when somebody pulls a slot machine, you get a little release of dopamine in your brain. The same thing happens when we check our phone. That's why it's so habitual. And we'll check our phone and we don't even know why we're checking our phone. But we're essentially laying down these little habit tracks in our brain, and it's reinforced by that release of dopamine. And teenagers, they're sending over 100 texts per day. So we are definitely consuming a lot of social media. And when you look at an average individual social media consumption in a lifetime, it is going to add up to 6 years and 8 months. I think this is just an incredible number. 6 years and 8 months. Now, again, this is where I just have everybody ask themselves, is social media something that you feel like is worth that amount of time? Time is one of our most valuable resources. And for some people, that absolutely is. And that's fantastic. But for others, this seems to be a bit of a check-in like, maybe I am using too much social media and it's taking away from other activities that really that are really good for my mental health, are good for my self-care. The other thing that's interesting about social media is that what we're seeing in terms of mental health and self-esteem and what happens when we're exposed to social media. And this is very much where I just encourage everyone to consider how they feel using it, and maybe doing a little experiment of not being on social media for a week or 2 weeks and seeing how you feel. And if you don't feel any different, then absolutely you can go back to your regular usage. But maybe there would be something that you would notice was a positive outcome. Maybe you didn't feel so bad about yourself after you got off social media, or maybe you slept better, or maybe you had more time to do something that you have been wanting to do, or spend time with your family or your children. Just a little science experiment of an N of 1, just you, to see how that works for you. And what are we seeing in the research in terms of social media? So the University of Michigan found that social media activates the same reward centers in the brain as drugs and alcohol. So remember how I was talking about that little dopamine release that you get? Same thing that happens with drugs and alcohol. And a study by the National Institutes of Health found that social media can contribute to the development of anxiety and depression. So again, this isn't for everybody, but for some people, it really can poorly impact mood. And there are so many reasons for this. You see this perfectly curated lifestyle that is mostly 100% unrealistic of others. So you get this constant comparison of, well, why am I not on that vacation? Or my house isn't that perfect? Or I don't drive that car, or I don't play that sport that good. Or, I mean, you could go on and on and on with the comparisons on social media. And most of them are completely unrealistic. We get these feelings of inadequacy and doubt. The other thing about that is that when you have connection with people in person, or this, constant going back and forth with a close friend, you share ups and downs of your life. You share the good and the bad. So the fights with the spouse, the fights with the kids, also the good things with the spouse and the good things with the kids. And that's a reciprocal transaction versus social media. It's just always being this constant feed of somebody else's life, and how fantastic that is. So in terms of like community and sharing and friendship, it is a much different experience when it's not done on social media. Okay, a couple of other studies. So the University of California had students take break from Facebook for a week. And those students experienced lower levels of stress and higher life satisfaction. And again, for a lot of the reasons why I just mentioned is what the responses were for these studies. And then the University of Pittsburgh, social media in the evening is associated with poor sleep quality and higher levels of fatigue. And this also could be multifactorial, but we know that when we're on electronics at night, that there's blue rays emitted into our eyes, which activates our brain. It makes it difficult for melatonin to increase, which is what helps us fall asleep. And it disrupts our circadian rhythm. So again, being mindful. What is your use like? When are you using it? How do you feel after? And is it negatively impacting how you interact with other people, the time you have, or how you sleep at night? So, okay, here are some suggestions on how you may moderate your use. So, again, not having to completely demonize social media. Think about the places in your life that it's very helpful, or where you feel like it's valuable, and then set limits around it. So you can set time limits. There are apps such as Screen Time on iPhones and Androids that can help you set time limits on how much you use social media. And again, like I said at the beginning, taking a break, or like we saw in the University of California, their study where anxiety decreased, mental well-being was improved. And that was just a week. Myself, I've taken 30-day breaks and noticed a big improvement. And I really ended up decreasing my use after, because I knew how much better it made me feel. And just like I was saying when I was talking about setting limits, and just being mindful of your use, being purposeful in it. Is this to keep, maybe you like social media for recipes. So making sure that your use is directed at what does bring joy. Like you make the most amazing banana bread that you found on one of your favorite foodie person's Instagram. That probably brought a lot of joy to you and others if you shared that bread. So just being thoughtful of, where do I get benefit? Because there is benefit. Turn off notifications. This is really great because our mind doesn't do very well in our world of hyper notifications. There's email, and then we have internal communications like Slack or Teams for work, and then we have text messaging, and other like messages on our phone. And having these constant dings or reminders or distractions is negatively impactful on our brain. That's why we know when we go into nature and we're disconnected, that it gives our minds this time to essentially restore and reset. And we see increases in cognitive performance and in well-being. So just turning off the notifications will be beneficial. And then take the time that you get back. Remember, 6 years and 8 months on social media. What would you do if somebody gave you an extra nearly 7 years of your life? So when you purposefully disengage from social media, engage or replace that with something that you really love. I mean, is there a book that you've been wanting to read, or a magazine you just want to like sit on the couch and go through without any disruptions? Spending time with loved ones, walking, moving your body. So many fantastic things that you could do in as opposed to that. Okay, so let's move on to another behavior that we may do that isn't so great for us. So we are becoming increasingly sedentary. And it's very interesting because if you look at charts that plot how active Americans have been since World War I to now, you see with each convenience invention, so think cars, washing machines, refrigerators, then computers. With each of these inventions, there's a little bit of a drop off in how active Americans have been. And it seems, in the past decade, there has been, before it was just this kind of gradual decline, and then this huge, steep decline in the past decade. 76% decline, actually, that's an incredible number. And why should we care about this? Well, sedentary behavior has been linked to risk of cardiovascular disease, which includes heart disease, stroke, and diabetes, type 2 diabetes. And we see that adults who spend more than 10 hours per day sitting had a 48% increased risk of dying from any cause, compared to those who spent less than 3 hours a day sitting. Also, it's impacting our mind and how we can cognitively think. One study found that older adults who spent more time sitting had lower cognitive function compared to those who are more active. And honestly, this could be a 2-hour lecture on the importance of moving our body in terms of mental health and improving cognition. But we're going to simplify this for now, that we are becoming increasingly sedentary, and we're seeing a rise associated that in our chronic illness, and then a decline in our cognitive an increase in cognitive impairment. Also, mental health. So there's a positive association between sedentary behaviors and symptoms of depression and anxiety. And this is likely for many reasons, but physical activity and sedentary behavior have different effects on the brain. And we see that there are certain neurotransmitters, like think dopamine and serotonin, that are released when we are physically active and are not when we're sedentary. And we know serotonin is is an important component of antidepressant medications, but we also get it when we move our body. Same thing with dopamine. We use dopamine in medications that help with concentration, think like Adderall or Ritalin. You also get a release of dopamine when we're physically active. So I always say, think of moving your body as getting a little bit of an antidepressant and a little bit of a stimulant medication like Ritalin or Adderall. Who doesn't want better concentration and improved mood? And then I love this study that came out of the Duke University. So they took two groups of people, and one group, they had them in an exercise program, and it was a group exercise program. And then the other group did nothing. So that was their control group. So what they noticed, in the control group, though, they were taking medication. They were taking Zoloft, but they weren't exercising. So at the end of the study, both groups had an improvement in mood, whether they took medications or whether they exercised. And what some of the differences that they saw is those that took medication got better a little bit faster, but those who exercised stayed better longer. Also, those that exercised had all of the side effect benefits of exercise, like improved cardiovascular health, better weight management. And those that took the medication, all medications unfortunately have side effects. However, this was really good that the researchers considered this. They thought, well, is our study maybe not as good as it could be because the people that exercise did it in a group? And we all know when we get out of our house, when we're with community, when we're with other people, that improves our mood. So were the results, were they skewed because people were exercising together? So they went back and did the study again, which I really like this. And they had the group exercisers still, but then they had home exercisers. So in their home, they didn't get to go out to a gym. In their home, they exercised. And then again, compared it to the medication group. And the medication they were using was Zoloft. Same thing happened. Whether you were exercising in a group or exercising at home, it was still as comparable to taking medications. So, I always like to say here that I'm a PA. I prescribe medications all the time. I'm not against medications at all. I'm so thankful for them. What we want to just glean from this is that there are things that we can do holistically that can help benefit our mood. And sometimes for some people, they are better than medications, and there are other options out there. Or if somebody's taking a medication, adding exercise for even more mood improvement. So this is just something to look back and think, how does this speak to me? And always considering this with your healthcare professional and having this discussion about implementing some of these lifestyle behaviors. And then for those that don't have a diagnosis of major depressive disorder, we still get an improvement in mood, and everybody has stress. So using exercise to mediate mood is a fantastic and healthy tool. Okay, so what can we do to start implementing exercise if we're not doing it right now? Well, we have all these smart watches, phones, gadgets, Fitbits, Garmin's, Apple Watches, and they can be kind of fun in terms of like motivation because they'll count your steps. So aiming for 10,000 steps. If you're not doing 10,000 steps or getting anywhere close to that, starting with maybe 1,000 and 2,000 and working your way up. Some of these devices will tell you how long you're standing versus how much you're sitting. You can be in little friendly competitions with other people. So using some sort of smartwatch or an activity tracker to keep yourself accountable. Putting the time aside on a calendar, scheduling this is a really effective way. That way, nothing else gets scheduled during that time. And I'm always a proponent for early morning exercise because at the end of the day, either I'm too tired or my stomach's too full from a big lunch, or I just want to hang out with my family, or there's a zillion excuses will come up. But if I wake up a little bit earlier and do it first thing in the morning, not only am I less at risk of missing it later in the day, but remember how I was telling you, you get that release of dopamine in your brain, you get a release of serotonin. My mood starts out great for the day, and my concentration is really great. So I'm ready to go to work, or I'm ready, whatever I've got ahead of me for that day. And then setting, again, with the lines of setting in a timer or setting this in calendar, I recommend people put in little breaks. And this can be every 30 to 60 minutes. That's really a great time. And even if that's just standing up and doing a few squats or taking a walk around your building, going outside and getting some fresh air, these almost become little exercise snacks. And there's a lot of good literature on exercise snacks, how that adds up. So not ever having this thought of, well, I don't have 30 to 60 minutes to participate in exercise, so I might as well not do anything. If you're getting up every 30 to 60 minutes and taking a 5-minute walk, that's really going to add up by the end of the day. And that adds up towards the end of the week. And that counts. We know that from the research. And then again, what about walking meetings at work? Trying to schedule those, or when you're on the phone, you always are standing, using a standing desk or a treadmill desk. There are options for those that work with a computer and need to be at a computer all the time, being able to make adjustments that way, doing wall sits. So many options. And again, making it fun. We most certainly don't want this to not be enjoyable. The point of this is to improve your brain health and mood. So whatever works best for you, then that would be the activity I would choose. So if that's a friendly competition, having walking groups, getting a standing desk, what will be most enjoyable for you? And knowing that you're increasing the lifespan and improving your mood. Okay. Self-talk. Well, I feel like I would be safe to say that sometimes our internal dialogue is not so positive, and some of the things that we say to ourselves, we would never say to other people. And this is really interesting when you look at self-talk and the research behind it. Very much how our brains have been programmed. I mean, when behavior scientists look at this, I mean, even back to when we were a child, and they estimate that in our childhood, we are told no about 100,000 times. And depending on the family system that we grew up with, that could have either been very negative or very positive. And we end up taking a lot of that with us. So my mother-in-law has a saying that kind of cracks me up. She always says, life is hard and then you die. And I think this is kind of a crack up because partially, well, that thought could be, well, everything's just going to be really hard and then it's going to be over. And sometimes we can take these mantras that are jokingly said throughout our lives and really end up molding our behaviors and how we look at our lives. So, what is some positive versus negative self-talk? Well, thinking that I'm broken or I'm not worth what X or whatever that is, instead of I'm healing. Or saying I hate feeling like this. Well, what if our thoughts are when we approached a situation that made us feel that way? It's okay to feel like this. My feelings are valid. Or no one will ever love me, instead of I deserve love and respect. Or body negativity. We have a lot of body negativity. I hate how my body looks versus I'm thankful for what my body can do for me. I am strong and capable. So the reason why I wanted to look at these side by side and the difference between those internal dialogues is that our thoughts shape our behaviors, and then our behaviors shape our actions, and then that changes the outcome. So, for example, if we look at negative talk in terms of our body, I hate how my body looks. That thought would potentially keep you from participating in something that you wanted to do. Let's say you wanted to go out and play in a community volleyball team, but you feel too self-conscious to do that. So you don't want to go out and do that, and you end up not signing up. Versus feeling like I have this strong, amazing body that gets me everywhere I need to go every day. And I'm very proud of how capable I am. That would get you to sign up for the community volleyball league. And then you would probably meet new people, maybe a new, really good friend. You would be out moving your body, participating in an activity that would give you the benefit of mood that we were talking about in terms of a release of dopamine and serotonin. So really being mindful of what we say and stopping and hearing our internal self-talk is important. Not because we should just have good positive self-talk, but because it shapes our behaviors and that shapes our actions and our outcomes from the example there. And we could go on and on. If we feel like we're not worth something, maybe we don't take the chance to do a new thing or a new opportunity. Versus if we have positive self-talk, we are more likely to take those chances or those opportunities that could have fantastic outcomes on the other end. So I just always recommend being mindful of what our internal self-talk is. Where is that coming from? Is that from a negative experience we've had? Is that maybe from a family system? Always having a certain emotion towards something? And how can we change that to benefit ourselves? And a number of ways that we can do that is using positive affirmations or visualizing us being successful at something like X that is your goal. So, just to put this in perspective of what an amazing tool visualization is, we see NBA, NFL, Olympic athletes all have coaches that walk them through and teach them visualization exercises of making that basket, making that play, following through with whatever that sport is. And they do that and pay a lot of money for these coaches because research has shown that visualization really impacts the outcome. So imagine yourself achieving your goals or visualization in a positive light is going to have a positive outcome for you if done consistently. And just really taking responsibility of these thoughts. Again, that's this mindfulness. Okay, you know what? I recognize this thought. This is not true, and I'm going to replace it with positive self-talk. And being surrounded by others that are positive, it can be really difficult if you're surrounded by others that consistently have negative self-talk or negative in nature. So being in a positive environment, and this takes practice. So neuroplasticity is a concept that essentially means that our minds are plastic. This is why we can learn new behaviors and learn new habits. We can learn good or bad habits. But essentially, neuroplasticity is the concept that doing things over and over and over again, we set up that new habit can mold our brain to a new practice. So if you have a lot of negative self-talk, you most certainly can change that. But it will take some time and doing this over and over again. There's also an app that I really like it's called Self-Talk Plus, and it's done by behavior scientists. And you can just listen to it in the background. If this is meaningful to you, I would recommend looking into that. And it's everything from stress management to implementing new habits. There's pretty much a program for anything that you may be looking at, even down to like addiction. So that would be one thing that I would recommend doing. Or there's a book, What to Say When I Talk to Myself. And this talks about self-talk and how that can positively or negatively impact our lives. Okay, sleep. Oh, I love the topic of sleep. And honestly, I think we could talk about this for like 2 hours, but we'll give the cliff notes for the interest of time. So I don't think anyone here, it's not lost on anyone here how important sleep is, or for those that have lost nights of sleep, either studying in college or have had a newborn in the house or have had anxiety that impacted sleep, or maybe have insomnia for whatever reason. Know how that can make you feel terrible the next day, impact your mood, impact your ability to think. And as you can see here on this slide, the effects of sleep versus insomnia, and you see that for mood and cognitive impairment, hormone abnormalities, difficulty with attention and concentration, And then it's very crucial to our immune system. Our sleep is so important to both brain health and physical health. And there are many reasons for that. Um, but essentially, sleep is one of the best things that we can do for our body, having restorative sleep and getting at least 7 to 8 hours of sleep at night. The other thing about that is we get our most restorative sleep in the early phases. So this is why not social media, but computers or screens or phones, when they negatively impact our sleep when we're using them right before bed because they're not letting our melatonin increase, we are not getting that restorative sleep early in the phases of sleep, which is really impactful. So I want to just take a step back and talk about sleep in a 24-hour cycle, because this is really going to help you in terms of getting the best sleep that you can if you think of it this way. So instead of thinking, how are we going to sleep within, what is impactful a couple of hours before sleep, we should really start the timer when we wake up in the morning and what we do throughout the day, how that impacts our sleep. So, and I'm going to tell you what to do to get the best night's sleep. So first thing, you wake up in the morning. We're starting the clock. This is the start of the 24 hours and the best sleep of our night. So when you first wake up, there are 3 things that you can do that will help you sleep well that night. One is moving your body. So I talked about how we could talk about exercise for hours and hours and all the benefits for you, but for this, we're just going to talk about sleep. Getting up and moving your body essentially is helping in terms of neurotransmitters that we were talking about, serotonin and dopamine, and it is also helping with increasing cortisol. So cortisol is that stress hormone. We want that to be highest in the morning and melatonin to be the lowest. And when we get up early in the morning, start exercising, we're increasing our cortisol, which ideally will go down throughout the day. Melatonin's turning off. So number 2 thing is if you can get outside. So if you can move your body outside, that's a 2-for-1, but you don't have to do it at the same time. But both things are recommended for improving your sleep and resetting your circadian rhythm or being on an appropriate circadian rhythm. So exercise and then getting outside, which can be done together or separate. The reason why you want to get outside as soon as you wake up is because the sun rays from the sun at different times of the day signal our brain where we should be in terms of circadian rhythm for our body. And every single cell in our body has its own circadian rhythm. And really, when we're in sync with the sun rising and sun setting, our body does the best. So in the morning, we go outside, 10 minutes on a sunny day, 15 to 20 minutes on a cloudy day, not wearing sunglasses or a hat. Please do not look directly into the sun. You just don't want to have any obstruction from sunlight getting into your eyes by having a sunglasses or hat on. That is telling our brains, whoo, it is morning. It is time to turn the systems on. We are going to be awake. We're going to get it ready for the day. Here we go. And again, balancing our hormones in our body. So cortisol being very high, melatonin being its lowest. There are other hormones involved too, but for simplicity of this conversation and keeping it time sensitive, these are the major players we're talking about. And then the third thing that you can do that will help is having a 1-minute cold shower. So cold water exposure. And this is most certainly the recommendation I get the most pushback from. And I also, when I was learning about the science, avoided this like the plague. For obvious reasons, nobody wants to be uncomfortable, even if it's for 60 seconds. But it is a fantastic tool for alertness, for improved mood, and again, just getting everything up, going where we want to be in the morning. We want to be alert and awake in the morning, and then we want to be tired and sleepy at night. So this is the perfect way to set yourself up for a good night's sleep. So getting outside, getting 10 minutes of sunlight or 15 to 20 on a cloudy day, and having 1 minute cold exposure in the shower. Okay, if you are a caffeine drinker, holding off on intake of caffeine 90 to 120 minutes after you wake up is most beneficial in terms of not having as bad of an afternoon crash. Also, you're not disturbing the systems that we are trying to perfect early in the morning by the 3 tips that I gave you. And the thought that researchers have found is that you're letting the body naturally wake up, become alert, before you're introducing an outside substance to assist with that. So if you can hold off on your caffeine intake for 90 to 120 minutes, that's great. And then being mindful of your caffeine intake throughout the day. So when we drink caffeine, it shuts off adenosine. And what adenosine does is it builds up throughout the day and it makes us sleepy. So when adenosine starts building up throughout the day and then it gets towards 9 o'clock at night and you're getting sleepy, it's doing its job, again with melatonin, which we'll talk about more later. So that's the second part of the day. Then throughout the day, you want to be exposed to bright lights. So whether you're going outside during the day to get those walks every 30 to 60 minutes, or you're sitting next to a window, or you use a ring light or a light box, overhead lights are on. You want all the light to come in to your eyes during the day, again, signaling your brain that it's time to be awake. So now let's go into the latter half of the day. That is when you want things to start turning down, shutting down, slowing down. And so that's when you don't want bright lights in your eyes. You want to use floor lights or lamps or dimmers. You don't want bright overhead light. This is at night when we're wanting to start turning off TVs and smartphones and iPads, laptops. We want to decrease the blue light going into our eyes that keep our brains activated. We want cortisol to be low and we want melatonin to be high. Having a nighttime routine, so maybe that's taking a warm bath or reading a book or spending some quiet time journaling. Again, slowing everything down. We also, same thing in the morning. Remember how I said during different times of the day that the sun emits rays into our eyes that tells our brain if we should be awake or tired? So getting the evening rays into our eyes is beneficial because, again, melatonin is going to increase and it's going to make us sleepy. So here's just a slide to go along with the recommendations that I just said. That will also help improve circadian rhythm and getting into a good sleep-wake cycle. So you want to stay on the same sleep-wake cycle 7 days of the week. It's very disruptive if you have a sleep cycle from Monday through Friday, and then Saturday and Sunday, you go to bed, 3 or 4 hours later than you normally would on a weekday, and then you sleep in late. For obvious reasons, it's disruptive to our staying in that same circadian rhythm. If you nap, limit them to 20 to 30 minutes and keep them before 3 p.m. And your sleep environment, you want it to be cool and dark. They're using earplugs or eye masks. If you have pets and they're disruptive in the bed, consider getting them their own little bed. So that they're not disturbing you. We talked about morning exercise. And then for those of you that have maybe had insomnia your whole life, or you feel like you have tried everything and it doesn't work, there's a type of therapy called CBTI, Cognitive Behavioral Therapy Insomnia. And this is probably one of the most beneficial resources for those that have chronic insomnia that have tried everything. And there are specific therapists that are trained in this. There's also groups and resources local to you. So I would just look up CBTI in your area to see what is accessible to you. Okay, and then one last thing about sleep. See, I said I could go on and on and on about this. What we eat can either negatively impact our sleep or positively impact it. So we just don't want to have a large meal right before bed. A light snack is fine. You want to keep it around 150 calories. Things that are good to include that will give us an extra benefit of sleep because they have a high melatonin content or magnesium content that is helpful for sleep. So fruit like pineapples, oranges, bananas, kiwis, and tart cherries have natural melatonin. And then nuts and seeds like pistachios, pumpkin seeds, cashews, walnuts contain melatonin. So interesting, 3 pistachios have the same melatonin content that we naturally release to become sleepy. And magnesium is very good in terms of relaxation. So these nuts and seeds also contain magnesium, which is helpful for that as well. And then drinking lemon balm or chamomile tea. Okay, worry. So we talked about self-talk, but what about worry? We can really get in these ruminative cycles of worry, and it really looks like you have the anxiety-provoking event or thought, and then you may avoid that. And we can do that with some of the things that we've talked about or we'll talk about in this session. So one could be anxious and choose to get on social media and surf social media as an avoidance tactic. Or maybe stressy. All of us have stressy at some point in our lives, I think. That's also an avoidance tactic or a maladaptive behavior that I was talking about at the beginning. And it does give us short-term relief. But again, like I talked about in the beginning, sometimes we do these behaviors for short-term relief that actually cause a negative impact in the long run. And as you can see here in the infographic, is that avoidance and that short-term relief ends up turning into long-term anxiety and growth. So what happens when we have excessive worry that can build and build and build and use a maladaptive behavior to put that off and then it gets worse? Well, there's lots of things that we can do. But for this talk, I wanted to talk about positive psychology and the exercise of positivity prompts. So one of the best ways we can do to stop that worry cycle or this negative rumination is engaging in some therapeutic tactics. And one of them are called like positivity prompt cards. There's a few different names for them, but essentially taking a few minutes, and this doesn't have to take very long. And there's many different questions. I've included 4 here that you could include in this activity whenever you feel like you're getting in a worry cycle, is that you sit down and you write, you describe the best part of your day. And sometimes our days that you have to dig deep for that. There's typically always something that you can find. So maybe everything has gone wrong, but you have a pet at home who really, really loves you and you really love them. And you're very thankful for this dog, cat, parakeet, whatever that is. Or a spouse, a partner, a loved one, that you have a home, that you have warm clothes, that you have food in your belly. Or maybe something really good happened that day and that you're having anxiety that is disproportional with how you're feeling. Maybe things are going well, but you have this worry about X. And that is very, very common. But essentially picking out the best part of the day, whether that's you get to go home and see your loved one or your pet, or you get to eat a yummy dinner, you're just thinking about these positive things in your life. The other thing is that you can describe how you've positively impacted somebody else. Humans are incredible social beings, and we love to give to others. It has this very powerful impact on our mental health. So maybe you haven't done something else for somebody for that day, and you could do something that would give you the opportunity to do that. Again, we're disrupting this ruminative cycle of worry, and these are the things that have been shown to be very helpful in terms of therapeutic tools. And then have you shown someone at work, or not necessarily, well, it could be at work, but have you shown someone that you care about them within the past week? And if not, what could you do? So at work or at home. And then explain how someone has helped you in the past week. And then some other tools that you can use, a gratitude journal. So similar to what we were talking about, describing the best part of your day, but a gratitude journal is something that you keep ongoing. This is a great exercise if we want to stack two habits together. Doing a gratitude journal is a great way to help improve sleep because you're away from screens. This is a calming down thing that you could do at night, and just spending 2 to 3 minutes writing down things you are thankful for. And then giving thanks to others. So having lots of opportunities to thank others, recognizing others for good deeds. This could be family or friends or coworkers. And then spending maybe 5 to 10 minutes reviewing good things from your day. So this is a little bit different than a gratitude journal, because gratitude journal, we think of like maybe doing that at night or doing that early in the morning. Grateful contemplation is meant to be used throughout the day during stress or anxiety. So you're taking yourself away from distractions like maybe computers or phones. And this is more of a mindful exercise where you just spend a short amount of time thinking about the good things that have happened in that day, or writing a gratitude letter towards somebody else. Okay, what about how we eat? So nutrition, and maybe sometimes getting a little bit too many over processed foods into our diet. And there's no one diet that says, hey, this is going to make you happy and never have any worry. We don't have that, but what we do know is increasing whole foods and limiting alcohol, caffeine, and sugary foods is beneficial for our body and our mind for a number of reasons. And we do see a correlation with improved mood and decreased anxiety. And essentially, why that is, or why researchers think that is because when we include more whole foods, so think grains like oatmeal and rice and quinoa and corn and then when we go to fruits and vegetables and nuts and seeds, including all of these unprocessed foods in our diet helps increase our microbiome. And why that is because foods like sweet potatoes and watermelon and rice and quinoa and corn and anything that's unprocessed has fiber in it. And our good gut bugs love fiber, and it just feeds off them and makes this very diverse microbiome. And we know, and as I think we're just getting to the tip of the discovery of the microbiome in terms of research, that the more diversity in fibrous foods, the better the microbiome, the decreased inflammation in our body. We know decreased inflammation in the body helps in terms of mood. There's been some good research there. And then we just feel well overall, which when we are feeling well, then that increases our mood as well, clearly. And then and there's this whole section of science called nutritional psychiatry, where they really focus on this and elaborate on those things that I was talking about. Also, caffeine, sugary foods, alcohol, we've seen correlations with that decreasing our mood. And then when we're thinking about nutrition, when we're thinking about food, how do we consume food? Consuming food with friends and family, taking time to really mindfully and purposefully eat. This is fantastic for our mood. When we share meals with others instead of eating them in the car or behind our desk, helps improve our mood. It also increases how mindful we are of our eating instead of when we're eating distracted, whether that is in the car or behind a desk, or watching TV. We don't enjoy our food as much, and that's because we're not dialed into our senses because we're distracted by other things. So we don't really capture the smells and the textures and how we're feeling, secondary to that distraction. So my recommendation is, if you're wanting to start changing some of your nutrition or considering that in terms of healthier mind and body, is start with just like healthier swaps. So would this be including a vegetable with your lunch and dinner, or having fruits for snacks instead of something that maybe comes in a package? Or instead of having 3 sodas a day, could you replace 2 of those with some fruit and water? So I'm thinking lemon and lime, maybe in some sparkling water, or putting frozen raspberries in just some ice water. Just starting to make some changes to include healthier, unprocessed foods in your diet. Okay, so to end this, to wrap this up, I talked a lot about different behaviors that you can do that are going to improve both your mind and your body. Behavior change is hard. So I just wanted to end on what are some things that you can do to implement some of these changes. So let's say you've decided, I would like to decrease my social media use, or I want to start exercising more. What are some tools to make this easier? And so a couple of that I'm going to go over is habit stacking. So essentially, let's take brushing our teeth, for example. Nobody has to tell us to brush our teeth anymore. We've all been brushing our teeth since we were little kids. And that is just something that we all do instinctively in the morning and before we go to bed. So this is an ingrained habit. We don't ever have to worry about doing this. So what a good way to start a new habit is to stack it on top of a habit we do religiously. So think of brushing your teeth. Let's say exercise. I want to start exercising. So when you brush your teeth at night, let's say it's morning exercise you want to do. When you brush your teeth at night, I'm going to lay out my exercise clothes. Literally, you can put them like, on top of your counter next to your sink. You want it to be right where you're going to brush your teeth. So every morning, or let's say we're going to do 2 mornings a week, I'm going to exercise. So at night, I'm going to lay out my clothes on the bathroom counter. As soon as I finish brushing my teeth, I'm going to put on those clothes and I'm going to start exercising. We're going to do that immediately after brushing our teeth. So that's habit stacking. The other one is using a 2-minute rule. So let's say, and we'll just use exercise as another example because we're chatting about that. There's been some really great stories about the 2-minute rule. And one was about a person who lost 100 pounds by going to the gym. And they did this using the 2-minute rule. So going to the gym sounded just like overwhelming and, too much to do. So going by the 2-minute rule, this person drove to the gym and didn't even go in the first week, just sat in the parking lot for 2 minutes and then left. Did that for a week. Then the next week, drove to the gym, went inside, didn't use any gym equipment, just walked around for 2 minutes and then left. Well, by week 3, going to the gym was not hard at all. That was starting to be ingrained. Now, went into the gym and actually did some movement, but it wasn't so intimidating. They started the habit by going, then they went inside and didn't see it was too bad. Also was able to kind of think, I wouldn't mind doing something on that machine, and that looks very doable to me. Well, fast forward 100 pounds later, but started out with 2 minutes. So is this gratitude journal you want to do? Only do that for 2 minutes. Is it walking 3 times a week? Only do that for 2 minutes and then increase it. Have an accountability system. So whether this is in your calendar, or you tell somebody, you have an accountability partner that does it with you. You guys are going to do this together. Redesigning your environment. So whatever the habit is, let's say you want to eat less processed foods. Remove processed foods from your house, from your office, essentially making a friction between the habit that you don't want to do, and then implement something positive there. So fill your house with fresh fruits and vegetables, or easy cut up fruits to easily snack on. So that's a way to redesign your environment. And then if something isn't working, reflect back on why that is and what could you do to change that. I'm so thankful that you guys joined me here today. I hope that you found 1 or 2 things that speaks to you and that you can implement into your daily life that is going to improve both your mental and physical health. Please feel free to reach out to me for any questions, and I'm so happy we got to spend this time together.